The Old Testament in 60 minutes. Genesis. God created the heavens and the earth in 7 days, modeling the 7-day work week with 6 days of work and 1 day of rest. The serpent deceived Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden, the one command God had given them not to do, so God expels them from the garden. God says to Adam, "Because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it." Adam is punished with a lifetime of working the field. God says to Eve, "I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." Abel offered a correct offering to God, but Cain offered an incorrect offering to God. So God rejects Cain's offering. God says to Cain, "Why are you angry? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. You must rule over it." Cain kills his brother Abel. God curses Cain, causing him to be a wanderer all of his life. God puts a mark on Cain to prevent anyone from killing him for his acts on Abel. The sons of God, which are spiritual beings from the heavenly realm, had children with human women, leading to the creation of the Nephilim, which were giant men. Of all the people of the land, only Noah was righteous to God. God gives Noah a covenant, and Noah is commanded to construct an ark and save his family. God blesses Noah and commands them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. God says, "Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed." For God made man in his own image. God is condemning the violence he saw in chapter 6 when it says, "The earth was filled with violence." The entire earth had one language, and they desired to build a city with a tower that reached heaven. God said, "This is only the beginning of what they will do, and nothing they propose to do will be impossible for them." So God confused their languages and forced them to spread out over the earth. God commands Abram to go to Canaan and tells him he will make him a great nation. Both Abram and his nephew Lot were living on the same land and were so successful the land could not support them both. Lot chose to settle in the Jordan Valley, and Abram settled in the land of Canaan. God says to Abram, "All the land that you see I will give to you and to your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth." Abram moved his tent to the oaks of Mamre at Hebron and built an altar to God. Abram defeated multiple kings of the local area after they took Lot hostage and took his possessions. Abraham meets Melchizedek, king of Salem, which is Jerusalem, who was the priest of the Most High God Yahweh. Melchizedek blessed him, and Abram gave him a tenth of all of his possessions. The word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, "Your very own son shall be your heir. Number the stars, so shall your offspring be." Abram believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness, an example of faith by Abram. The Lord came to Abram, creating a covenant, saying, "To your offspring I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates." God was waiting for the iniquity of the Amorites to be complete before driving them off the land of Canaan, meaning executing his judgment of their sins. The sins of the Amorites. Hagar, Sarai's Egyptian servant, gave birth to Ishmael, Abram's first son. The angel of the Lord appeared to Hagar, saying he will multiply Hagar's offspring. God renames Abram to Abraham. God's covenant with Abraham is remembered by the sign of circumcision. God renames Sarai to Sarah. God promises a son, Isaac, to Sarah in her old age. The Lord appears to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre. God himself and 2 angels traveling with him ate a meal with Abraham and Sarah. God tells Abraham that Sarah, who is very old, will have a son in the next year. God is preparing to head down to Sodom and Gomorrah to judge them, because their sin is so rampant. Abraham intercedes for Sodom, petitioning God to spare the city if even 10 righteous people are found in the city. 2 angels rescue Lot and his family from Sodom after nearly being attacked by the inhabitants of the city. God rained down sulfur and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah and all the inhabitants of the Jordan River Valley. Lot's wife looked back after being commanded not to, and was turned into a pillar of salt. The daughters of Lot get him drunk and have children with him, creating the Moabites and the Ammonites. God says that Abraham is a prophet. God commands Abraham to sacrifice his only son Isaac. The angel of the Lord stops Abraham before doing so and says, "I know that you fear God, seeing that you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Isaac has two sons, Jacob and Esau. Esau sells his birthright for a bowl of lentil stew. Jacob, pretending to be his brother Esau, tricks his father Isaac to give him his blessing. Jacob sees a dream, seeing a ladder between heaven and earth, with the angels of God ascending and descending on it. The Lord stood above it. Jacob set up a pillar and called the place Bethel. The angel of God said to Jacob in a dream, I am the God of Bethel. Jacob wrestled with a man and prevailed, leaving Jacob's hip out of socket. The man says, Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. The man blesses Jacob. Jacob called the place Peniel and said, For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. God renames Jacob to Israel. Jacob called the place where God had spoken with him Bethel. The descendants of Esau are called the Edomites. Joseph was the son of Jacob and had 11 brothers, which are the 12 tribes of Israel. Jacob loved Joseph more than all of his brothers, and the brothers hated him for it. Joseph had a dream about how he would rule over his brothers and be the greatest of his brothers. His brothers again hated him for it. Joseph had another dream where the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. His father rebuked him, saying, Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you? His brothers were again jealous of him. The brothers plotted to kill Joseph. His brothers stripped him of his robe of many colors and threw him into a pit. Reuben pleaded that they would not kill him, just throw him in the pit. Judah said that it would be better to sell him to the Ishmaelites. So they pulled him from the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. Joseph was taken to Egypt. Reuben returned to the pit, not finding Joseph. The brothers dipped Joseph's robe in blood and gave it to their father, who was convinced that Joseph had been killed by a wild animal. Joseph was in prison in Egypt until he was 30 years old. Joseph interprets a dream of Pharaoh, leading to a successful preparation for a coming famine. The Pharaoh of Egypt appoints Joseph over his entire house, becoming a great ruler. Jacob sends the brothers to Egypt to buy grain. The brothers appeared before Joseph and bowed down to him. They did not recognize him, so Joseph treats them like strangers. On his first appearance, for a second time, the brothers returned to Egypt to buy grain during a famine. Joseph finally revealed his identity to his brothers. Joseph returned to his father Jacob in Canaan, and the brothers told him, Joseph is alive and he's ruler of all the land of Egypt. Joseph brought his family to settle in Egypt in the area of Goshen. Exodus. The Israelites were slaves in Egypt. The angel of the Lord appears to Moses in the burning bush. The Lord said, Moses, Moses, do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He says, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He says that his name is I am who I am. Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. God commands him to free his people from Egypt. God unleashes plagues on Pharaoh and Egypt until he releases the Hebrews. God says, On all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. God is using the plagues to demonstrate his supremacy over the gods of Egypt, such as the Egyptian gods of the Nile River, livestock, the sky, and the sun. The blood of the Passover lamb is sacrifice and protects them from the 10th plague, which is the death of all of Egypt's firstborn. God leads the Israelites in a pillar of cloud and pillar of fire, and led them across the Red Sea. The angel of God stood in the pillar of cloud between the Israelites and the Egyptian army. The Lord was in the pillar of fire and cloud. Moses led them across the Red Sea where the waters were held up to cross. The Egyptian army was destroyed by the Red Sea. God delivered the Israelites bread from heaven in the desert, called manna. They ate this bread for 40 years. The people demand water. God says to Moses, You shall strike the rock, and water shall come out of it. Joshua fights a battle with Amalek. God says, I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Moses appoints judges over the people, rather than he himself judging all of the people alone. Moses meets with God on Mount Sinai. God is on the mountain, wrapped in smoke and fire. God institutes the 10 Commandments. Moses says to the people, Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. God institutes various laws, such as the death penalty for murder, judgment of an eye for an eye, and the protection of widows and orphans. God says, "The best of the first fruits of your ground you shall bring into the house of the Lord your God." God says, "I send an angel before you to guard you on the way, and to bring you to the place that I have prepared." Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. God says he will send my terror before you and will send hornets to drive out the Canaanites. Moses and 70 leaders of Israel went up to the mountain, and they saw the God of Israel. There was under his feet, as it were, a pavement of sapphire stone. They beheld God and ate and drank. God establishes rules for the tabernacle and the priests. In the desert, the Israelites construct a golden calf idol. The Lord sent plagues on them for this. God says, "I will send an angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites." Moses came down from Mount Sinai with 2 tablets. His face was shining, and the people were afraid. The Ark of the Covenant is created. Numbers. Israel leaves Mount Sinai. God tells Moses to gather 70 men of the elders of Israel to assist him with leadership. God will take some of the spirit that is on Moses and put it on them. God says that he speaks to prophets among the people in visions and dreams. But with Moses, his most faithful, he speaks mouth to mouth, clearly and not in riddles, and Moses beholds the form of the Lord. 12 spies are sent into Canaan, finding that the people who dwell in the land are strong and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Enoch. Caleb, one of the spies, says, "Let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are able to overcome it." The rest of the men said that they were not strong enough to overcome the land of Canaan, not having faith in God's promise that they would overcome all the people in the land of Canaan. The spies said they saw the Nephilim, the sons of Enoch, who come from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers. The glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the people of Israel. The Lord said to Moses, "How long will this people despise me? And how long will they not believe in me? In spite of all the signs that I have done among them, I will strike them with pestilence and disinherit them, and I will make of you a nation greater and mightier than they." God is criticizing their lack of faith in his power and his words. In their upcoming conquest of Canaan, despite seeing his power previously, God will empower anyone who has faith in him and disinherit and destroy anyone who does not have faith in him. God says, "The Israelites have not obeyed my voice, and none of those who despise me shall see the land. But Caleb has a different spirit and has followed me fully. I will bring into the land in which he went, and his descendants shall possess it." Meaning Caleb had faith in God's future promise of successful conquest. Only Joshua and Caleb of the spies remained alive. The people of Israel went without God's command to the hill country of Canaan, and the Amalekites and Canaanites defeated them. Korah's rebellion was a group of people who rebelled against Moses. God destroyed them all by causing the ground to open up and causes fire to consume them. Moses strikes a rock with his staff, and water came out of it. But God had commanded Moses to tell the rock to yield its water. God is angry with Moses that he did not believe in him and in his words, and punishes him, saying, "You shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them." Edom refuses to allow Israel to pass through their lands on their highway. Aaron dies. The people of Israel were complaining to God about being in the wilderness. So God sent fiery serpents to bite and kill the people. Moses repented for his people, and God told him to make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and everyone who is bitten, when he sees it, shall live. The bronze serpent pole healed the people of Israel of their sin. King Og of Bashan and his sons are defeated by the Israelites. They left no survivors. King Og was a remnant of the Rephaim, a clan of giants. Balak, king of Moab, attempts to get Balaam to curse the people of Israel. The Lord puts words in Balaam's mouth and blesses Israel. The Spirit of God again puts words in Balaam's mouth and says, "God brings him out of Egypt, and is for like him the horns of the wild ox. He shall eat up the nations, his adversaries. Blessed are those who bless you, and cursed are those who curse you." Balak is angered that instead of cursing Israel, Balaam has blessed Israel. Balaam's final oracle says, A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and Edom shall be dispossessed. He also says, Amalek was the first among the nations, but its end is utter destruction. The people of Israel began intermingling with the daughters of Moab. They sacrificed to their gods and worshipped the god Baal. God destroyed 24,000 people for this event. God outlines many rules, including Sabbath offerings, Passover offerings, the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and others. The Lord desired vengeance on Midian. They killed all the males, killed the kings of Midian, and killed Balaam the prophet. The Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan, saying, Drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you, and destroy all their figured stones, and destroy all their metal images, and demolish all their high places. But if you do not drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you, then those of them whom you let remain shall be as barbs in your eyes and thorns in your sides. Deuteronomy. God forbids idolatry, which is faith and worship of any idols, of any creature or person. Otherwise, God will scatter you among the nations. The Lord spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. You heard the sound of his words, but saw no form. He did this so they would not act corruptly, by making a carved image for yourselves, in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female. God says that if the Israelites worship other gods, he will exile them. But if they seek God again, he will return them from exile. God gives the 10 Commandments, including not to murder, commit adultery, steal, lie, or covet your neighbor's possessions. God says, You shall have no other gods before me. The greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all of your heart. God says of the Canaanites, You shall not intermarry with them, for they would turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods. You shall break down their altars and burn their carved images with fire. God says of his people, He will bless you and multiply you. He will also bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your ground. You shall be blessed above all peoples. The reason God gives the people of Israel the land is not because of your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart. Are you going in to possess their land? But because of the wickedness of these nations, the Lord your God is driving them out before you, and that he may confirm the word that the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. God hates foreign gods because they even burn their sons and their daughters in the fire to their gods. God forbids worship of any other gods or any of the host of heaven, or the sun or the moon. God commands Israel's kings to not acquire many wives, otherwise his heart will turn away towards foreign gods, as Solomon's did. God gives examples of practices that the Israelites should not follow, like the nations that surround them. The Israelites shall not burn their sons or daughters as an offering. They shall not practice divinations, or tell fortunes, or interpret omens, or become a sorcerer, or necromancer, or attempt to speak to the dead. When besieging a city, you shall put all of its males to the sword, but plunder everything else. God commands the Israelites to completely destroy the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, so that the Israelites will not do all of their unacceptable practices for their foreign gods. God says, No Ammonite or Moabite shall enter the assembly of the Lord, because they did not meet Israel with bread and water on their way out of Egypt. God says, Israel will not detest an Edomite, because they are your brothers. You shall not detest an Egyptian, because you are a sojourner in their land. No father shall be put to death because of their children, and no child shall be put to death because of their father. If the Israelites are righteous, they will prosper in the land of Canaan. If the Israelites are unrighteous, God will curse them. He will destroy them and scatter them across the earth and serve foreign gods, and have no peace. Joshua is the successor of Moses. God gave the nations their inheritance when he divided mankind. He fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted heritage. No foreign god was with Jacob. Joshua. Joshua is in charge of taking over the promised land. Joshua sends 2 spies into Jericho. They hid in the house of Rahab in Jericho. The spies promised to protect Rahab against the coming invasion. Israel and the Ark of the Covenant cross the Jordan River. By Jericho, Joshua encounters a man with a sword in his hand. He tells Joshua, "I am the commander of the army of the Lord." Joshua fell on his face and worshipped him, saying, "What does my Lord say to his servant?" And he said, "Take off your sandals, the place where you are standing is holy." The Israelites march around the walls of Jericho 7 times on the 7th day, blew the trumpets, shouted all together, and the walls fell down. They burned with fire everything in Jericho except for the silver and gold, which was put in the Lord's treasury. Joshua stated that any man who tries to rebuild Jericho is cursed. A man named Achan had stolen items from the conquest of Jericho and brought misfortune upon Israel. All of Israel destroyed the items he took and stoned him. Joshua battled the Amorites, and God cast stones from heaven on them. God made the sun and the moon stand still for a whole day until this battle completed. Joshua had conquest in both southern Canaan and northern Canaan. Joshua eliminated all the remaining Anakim except for Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. Joshua distributes areas of land to different tribes of Israel. Judah did not successfully drive out the Jebusites in their lands around the area of Jerusalem. Ephraim did not successfully drive out the Canaanites in their lands. Manasseh did not successfully drive out the Canaanites in their lands. God establishes cities of refuge, places safe for perpetrators of manslaughter. Upon the death of the high priest, all the people of the cities of refuge can return to their towns. Because the death of the high priest atones for sins, Joshua tells Israel, "Do not mix with these nations remaining among you or make mention of the names of their gods or swear by them or serve them. If you make marriages with them, God will no longer drive out these nations before you, but they shall be a snare and a trap to you." Judges. Various tribes of Israel were unsuccessful in driving out the Canaanites, and often using the Canaanites for forced labor. The angel of the Lord said to Israel, "I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall break down their altars, but you have not obeyed my voice. What is this you have done? So now I say, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare to you." Joshua dies. God raises up judges to fight Israel's enemies after the death of Joshua. But often, after the judge had died, Israel would go back to following foreign gods. God gave Israel into the hands of Midian for 7 years. God says, "I am the Lord your God. You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell. But you have not obeyed my voice." The angel of the Lord calls upon Gideon to destroy the altars of Baal and fight Midian. Gideon lays a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. He asks for God to show his favor by putting water on the fleece, but having the ground itself remain dry. The next morning, he finds it as he asked. Gideon asks again, but in reverse, for the fleece to be dry and the ground to be covered in water. The next morning, it was as he asked. This was God's sign to Gideon. Gideon died in old age, having 70 sons through many wives and concubines. After Gideon died, Israel turned to worship the Baals. Israel was evil, so God gave them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Manoah and his wife meet the angel of God. Manoah asks for his name, and the angel of God says that his name is wonderful. They offered burnt offerings on an altar, and when the flame went up from the altar, the angel of the Lord also went up in the flame of the altar. Manoah is fearful and says, "We shall surely die, for we have seen God." Manoah's wife, a barren woman, gave birth to Samson. Samson married a Philistine woman, violating the command not to marry foreign women. She is killed by the Philistines. Samson strikes down 1,000 Philistine men with the jawbone of a donkey. Samson meets Delilah, who attempts to deceive him to get the secret to his strength. Samson tells her false reasons for his strength multiple times, and Delilah attempts to entrap him multiple times. Finally, Samson reveals the truth that shaving his hair will remove his power. The Philistines shave his head, gouge out his eyes, and take him down to Gaza, and bound him in bronze shackles. The lords of the Philistines gathered to sacrifice to the god Dagon, with Samson bound for their entertainment. Samson brought down the 2 pillars which held up the building, killing everyone. 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. The prophet Samuel is born to Hannah, who was barren. God granted her request. The prophet Eli had 3 sons who were worthless men. Their sin was great because they treated their offering to the Lord with contempt. Eli attempts to counsel them, but they do not listen. God desires to end the house of Eli and says to Samuel, "I declare to him that I am about to punish his house forever for the iniquity that he knew, because his sons were blaspheming God, and he did not restrain them. The sons of Eli are killed by the Philistines, and the prophet Eli quickly dies upon hearing the news. The Philistines capture the Ark of the Covenant after a battle. The Philistines place the Ark of the Covenant next to an idol of the god Dagon in Ashdod. By morning, the idol of Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the Ark, and his head and his hands were cut off. God puts plagues on all the people in the camp around the Ark. The Philistines return the Ark to Israel. Samuel commands Israel to reject foreign gods. Only then will God deliver them from the Philistines. The people of Israel reject Baal and the Ashtaroth. Israel demands a king to rule over them like the nations around them. God says in response, "Obey the voice of the people and all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. Now then, obey their voice. Only you shall solemnly warn them and show them the ways of the king who shall reign over them." God chooses King Saul to be king. He was the most handsome man in all of Israel and also taller than any man in Israel. Saul makes an unlawful sacrifice, disobeying God's command. Samuel says, "The Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever, but now your kingdom shall not continue." Jonathan is the son of King Saul. God says, "I regret that I have made Saul king, for he has turned back from following me and has not performed my commandments." God chooses David, son of Jesse, as king. David was handsome, skillful in playing the lyre. He was a man of war, prudent in speech, and a man of good presence. David became the armor-bearer of Saul. Whenever a harmful spirit came upon Saul, David played the lyre, and the harmful spirit departed from him. David defeats Goliath, a giant of the Philistines. Jonathan, son of King Saul, became friends with David. Saul is jealous of David and desires to kill him, and harmful spirits come upon Saul in his rage. God was with David, but God had departed from Saul. David marries the daughter of Saul, named Michal. Saul attempts to kill David, but David evades him. Jonathan helps David escape, and Saul says to Jonathan, "For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Therefore, send him and bring him to me, for he shall surely die." Saul gives the command to kill the priests at Nob because they had given David bread and the sword of Goliath from the temple and allowed him to escape. He had 85 priests killed. While hiding in a cave, David spares Saul's life after having the opportunity to kill him. David cuts off the corner of Saul's robe to prove this to Saul. Because of this, Saul admits he was unrighteous. The prophet Samuel dies. David took Abigail as a wife, and also others. Saul pursues David again, and David spares Saul's life yet again, because God forbid that I shall put out my hand against the Lord's anointed. Saul again repents to David. David flees to camp in Philistine lands to avoid the pursuit of Saul. Saul consults with the medium of Endor after being fearful of the size of the army of the Philistines, and not hearing any word from the Lord. The woman summons the dead prophet Samuel. He says, "The Lord has done to you as he spoke by me, for the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor, David, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord and did not carry out his fierce wrath against Amalek." The Amalekites raided the village of David and took captive his wives. David inquired of the Lord if he should pursue the Amalekites. God confirmed his blessing to fight them. David pursued them and defeated them. The Philistines defeat Saul. Saul fell on his own sword, otherwise the Philistines would mistreat him as a prisoner. Saul's 3 sons died. The Philistines cut off his head, stripped his armor, and put it in the temple of Ashtaroth. The Israelites later recovered his body and buried him. David is anointed the king of Judah. Meanwhile, Ishbosheth, son of Saul, was anointed king of Israel. After the death of the king of Israel, David is anointed king of Israel. God told David he would defeat the Philistines in the valley of the Rephaim, so he did as God commanded. Upon returning the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, David danced before the Lord with all of his might, wearing a linen ephod. God told the prophet Nathan to tell King David, "When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come from your own body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son." David desires Bathsheba, who's the wife of Uriah the Hittite, one of his military commanders. David placed Uriah at the front lines of a battle, killing him. The prophet Nathan tells David of the story of a rich man and a poor man. The rich man took the belongings of the poor man. David says, "The man who has done this deserves to die, and he shall restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing and because he had no pity." Nathan reveals that David is the rich man in the story who has taken the wife of Uriah. The Lord said to David, "I have gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your arms and gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with a sword and have taken his wife to be your wife. Behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes and will give them to your neighbor." Nathan says that the newborn child of David, born of Bathsheba, will die because of this. After this event, a new child is born to David and Bathsheba, named Solomon. David defeats an uprising against him caused by his own son, Absalom. The anger of the Lord was against Israel, and he incited David to number Israel and Judah. So, David decides to take a census of the army of Israel rather than relying on the power of God to fight their battles. God said to David as punishment, "Shall 3 years of famine come to you in your land? Or will you flee 3 months before your foes while they pursue you? Or shall there be 3 days' pestilence in your land?" So, God sent pestilence on Israel, and 70,000 men died. David built an altar and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings, and the plague ended. 1 Kings and 2 Kings. Solomon, son of David and Bathsheba, is anointed king. King David dies, having reigned for 40 years. Solomon made a marriage alliance with the Pharaoh of the king of Egypt and married Pharaoh's daughter. The Lord appears to Solomon in a dream, saying, "Ask what I shall give you." Solomon asked for wisdom and discernment. Because Solomon had asked for wisdom, and not long life, or riches, or destruction of his enemies, but asked for discernment, God gives him everything, wisdom and also riches. Solomon became extremely wealthy and full of wisdom. Solomon builds the temple. Solomon builds himself a grand palace. Solomon places the Ark of the Covenant in the new temple. A cloud filled the temple, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. God appears to Solomon in a dream, making a conditional covenant with Solomon, saying, "If you will walk before me as David your father walked, doing according to all that I have commanded you, then I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised David your father. But if you turn aside from following me, you or your children, but go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off from Israel, from the land that I have given them, and this house will become a heap of ruins." Solomon was extremely wealthy, with a grand throne room. Solomon had many foreign women, including the Pharaoh's daughter, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittite women. God had previously commanded the kings of Israel, "You shall not enter into marriage with them, neither shall they with you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods." Solomon had 700 wives who were princesses and 300 concubines, all who worshipped foreign gods and made offerings to foreign gods. Solomon, in his old age, began to follow foreign gods like the Ashtaroth. He even built a high place for Chemosh from Moab and for Molech of the Ammonites. God said to Solomon, "Since you have not kept my covenant and my statutes that I have commanded you, I will surely tear your kingdom away from you and give it to your servant." God began raising adversaries against Solomon for his disobedience. Solomon reigned for 40 years. Upon Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam reigned in his place. After the death of King Solomon, Israel became a divided kingdom. The northern kingdom was called Israel. The southern kingdom was called Judah. Jeroboam, king of Israel, made 2 golden calves and put them in Dan. He made temples on high places and appointed priests who were not Levites. God says he will destroy the kingdom of Jeroboam because they have followed foreign gods and done evil. Jeroboam dies after 22 years of reigning. Judah, the southern kingdom, was also acting with evil, such as building high places to foreign gods. Various kings act righteously, and various kings act unrighteously. The prophet Elijah caused a drought. Elijah resurrects a boy who had died of sickness. God says to Elijah in the 3rd year, "Go, show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth." Jezebel, wife of King Ahab, killed many prophets. Elijah the prophet confronts the prophets of Baal at Mount Carmel. He suggests they see whose God is more powerful. They set up bulls to set fire to. The prophets of Baal call upon their God to no response. Elijah repaired the altar of the Lord, called to God, and fire fell and consumed the burnt offerings. After winning, Elijah seized the prophets of Baal and had them executed. The word of the Lord spoke to Elijah in a cave. God condemns Ahab and says he will end the house of Ahab. God also condemns Jezebel, wife of Ahab, saying the dogs shall eat Jezebel within the walls of Jezreel. King Ahab repents, and God says, "Have you seen how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Because he has humbled himself before me, I will not bring the disaster in his days, but in his son's days I will bring the disaster upon his house." The prophet Micaiah says that he saw the Lord sitting on his throne room in heaven, surrounded by the hosts of heaven. The Lord said, "Who will entice Ahab that he may go up and fall?" And a spirit came forward, saying, "I will entice him." And God sent him. The spirit was a lying spirit in the mouth of Ahab's prophets. King Ahab died in battle against the Syrians. Upon crossing the Jordan River, chariots of fire and horses of fire separated Elijah and Elisha. And Elijah was taken up by a whirlwind into heaven. As the prophet Elisha was traveling, some boys came out of the city and jeered at him, saying, "Go up, you bald head." Elisha curses them, and 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of them. Elisha prayed to God and resurrected a young boy. Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, had leprosy. The prophet Elisha instructs Naaman to wash in the Jordan River 7 times. Naaman is healed of his leprosy. Naaman says, "Behold, I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. From now on, I will not offer burnt offerings or sacrifice to any god but the Lord." Naaman returned to Syria, now confessing his faith only to the God of Israel. The army of Syria was warring with Israel. Elisha reveals in a vision to a fearful servant that the mountains were filled with horses and chariots of fire under the protection of God. When the Syrians came up against Elisha, he struck them with blindness. Jehu, king of Israel, had Jezebel, wife of Ahab, thrown down from the walls, and horses trampled her. Jehu said that Jezebel was a cursed woman. They were unable to bury her because she was completely destroyed. Jehu put all the worshippers of Baal into a house and burned the house down. Jehu wiped out Baal worship from Israel. The prophet Elisha dies. King Ahaz burned his son as an offering to foreign gods. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and carried away the Israelites to Assyria. God exiled them because the people of Israel had served idols and built high places to false gods. They had worshipped all the hosts of heaven in Baal instead of God. They offered their sons and daughters as offerings and practiced divinations and omens. The king of Assyria placed many foreign people from Babylon and others into the cities of Samaria. Because these people did not fear the Lord or know his laws, God sent lions among them. The king of Assyria was told, "God has sent lions among them, because they do not know the law of the God of the land." So the king of Assyria sent prophets of God to them. They feared God, but also worshipped their foreign gods. The angel of the Lord strikes down 185,000 Assyrians in their war camp. The prophet Isaiah said to King Hezekiah, "Hear the word of the Lord. Behold, the days are coming when all that is in your house, and that which your fathers have stored up till this day, shall be carried to Babylon." King Josiah removed all the priests who burned incense to Baal, to the sun and the moon, and the constellations, and all the host of the heavens. Before Josiah, no such Passover had been kept since the days of the judges who judged Israel, or during all the days of the kings of Israel or of the kings of Judah. There was no king like Josiah who turned to the Lord with all of his heart, according to the law of Moses. Josiah dies in battle against Egypt. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up to Jerusalem and besieged the city. He defeated them and captured them, taking all of them to Babylon, called the Babylonian exile. They destroyed the temple, which was the first temple in Israel. 1 Chronicles and 2 Chronicles. Reuben was the firstborn of Jacob, but because he dishonored his father through his actions, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph. Judah became strong among his brothers, and a chief came from them, being King David. Yet the birthright belonged to Joseph. Saul was of the tribe of Benjamin. Saul died for his breach of faith, and he did not keep the commands of the Lord, and also consulted a medium seeking guidance, not seeking guidance from the Lord. So the Lord put him to death and turned the kingdom over to David. David defeated many clans of giants, and there was again war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature, who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number, and he was also descended from the giants. These were descended from the giants in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hands of his servants. Satan stood against Israel and incited David to number Israel, and so David decided to call for a census, leading to God being displeased. David repents. God sends a pestilence on Israel, killing 70,000. God sent the angel to Jerusalem, preparing to destroy it. The angel of the Lord stood on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. David lifted his eyes and saw the angel of the Lord standing between earth and heaven, and in his hand a drawn sword stretched over Jerusalem. David pleads that the punishment would be on him, not on Israel. The angel of the Lord commanded that an altar be built. David commits burnt offerings and peace offerings, and God pulls back the angel of the Lord. The word of the Lord came to David and said, "You have shed much blood and have waged great wars. You shall not build a house to my name, because you have shed so much blood before me on the earth. But instead, Solomon will build the temple." King Uzziah began righteously as king, but eventually became proud because of his strength. King Uzziah enters the temple of the Lord and attempts to burn incense at the altar. The priests rush in and tell him that only the priest can burn incense. Uzziah is struck with leprosy until the day he dies. The reason that God exiled the Israelites was because God spoke persistently to them by his messengers, because he had such compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they kept mocking the messengers of God, despising his words and scoffing at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord rose against his people until there was no remedy. King Nebuchadnezzar takes away the Israelites into exile in Babylon for a period of 70 years, until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths. At the end of this period, King Cyrus of Persia allowed them to return to Jerusalem. Daniel. The Israelites of the kingdom of Judah were exiled to Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar assembled some of the finest of the Israelites, who were young and well educated, to exist in the king's court and learn the language of the Chaldeans. God gave Daniel understanding in all visions and dreams. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. None of his wise men and magicians were able to tell him what the dream was and the interpretation. Daniel reveals the dream. The king saw a great image of a man with a head of gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet made of partly iron and partly clay. Then a stone cut by no human hand struck the image and broke it into pieces. The stone became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Daniel says that Nebuchadnezzar is the head of gold, and the kingdoms that rise after Babylon are the other kingdoms. In the days of the fourth kingdom, God will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed. Nebuchadnezzar praises Daniel and says, "Truly your God is God of gods and Lord of kings." Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold and commanded all people to fall down and worship the image. Otherwise, you will be thrown into a burning fiery furnace. He says to Daniel's 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that they will be thrown into the fiery furnace, and who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? They state that God is able to deliver them, but if not, they will still not serve their gods or the image. Nebuchadnezzar heated the furnace 7 times hotter than normal and threw them in. Upon throwing them in, he says, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." He declares the power of the God of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar has a second dream. He sees a tree which is very tall, reaching to heaven. All animals lived around it. He saw a watcher, a holy one, come down from heaven, and he said, "Chop down the tree, let the beasts flee from under it, but leave the stumps of its root, bound with a band of iron and bronze. Let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from a man's, and let a beast's mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him. The sentence is by the decree of the watchers, that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdoms of men." Daniel says that the tree is King Nebuchadnezzar. He says that the heavenly ones will drive him to live with the beasts of the field for 7 periods of time, until he knows that the Most High rules earth. At the end of this period, God restores Nebuchadnezzar, and he acknowledged the power of the Most High. King Belshazzar, son of Nebuchadnezzar, made a great feast and commanded that the vessels of gold and silver, taken from the temple in Jerusalem, be brought to his feast. A hand appeared, writing on the wall. The king saw it, asking his wise men to read it, but none could. They summoned Daniel. Daniel says that, like his father, the king has not humbled himself, and has lifted himself up against the Lord of heaven, and used his vessels in his feast, and praising the gods of silver and gold, but not the true God. Daniel says the interpretation is, Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and has brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. That night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom. Darius set Daniel over a large portion of his kingdom. The satrap governors under him looked for ways to undermine him. They make a law that says that no one can make a petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to the king. Otherwise, they will be thrown into the den of lions. Daniel was found guilty of this offense and was thrown into the den of lions. But Darius desired to deliver him. Darius rises the next morning and finds Daniel unharmed. The king has the rulers who conspired against Daniel thrown into the lion's den. Daniel saw a dream with a vision of heaven. He saw various beasts that came and went, which represent the 4 kingdoms. Daniel saw the Ancient of Days, which is God, and said, His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, its wheels were burning fire. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. Daniel saw in the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, and glory, and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away. The saints of the Most High possess the kingdom forever, under the leadership of the Son of Man, who is served and worshipped by his saints. Daniel sees a vision of a ram and a goat. The ram with the 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia, and the goat is the king of Greece. A king will cause fear among the saints. Daniel prays and repents to God for his people in exile. The angel Gabriel appears. Gabriel says that 70 weeks will be the timeline to put an end to sin, to seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. From the start of the rebuilding of Jerusalem, there will be an anointed one who is a prince. There will be 7 weeks. Then, for 62 weeks, Jerusalem will be built again. After the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off. The city, Jerusalem, will be destroyed, and the temple will be destroyed. Daniel sees a vision of a man. He saw standing on the banks of the river Tigris a man clothed in linen, with a belt of fine gold. His face was like the appearance of lightning. His eyes were like flaming torches, and his voice was like the sound of a multitude. The men standing with Daniel did not see the vision. The man says to Daniel, Now I have been sent to you. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia, and came to make you understand what is to happen to your people in the latter days. The man says, But now I will return to fight against the prince of Persia. And when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. But I will tell you what is inscribed in the book of truth. There is none who contends by my side against these except Michael, your prince. The angel Michael, who fights to protect Israel, is battling the spiritual powers of the kingdom of Persia and Greece. During the prophetic times of these visions, there will be the abomination of desolation in the temple, with an unlawful sacrifice that is blasphemous to God. And at that time shall arise Michael, the great prince, who has charge of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall wake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Ezekiel. The word of the Lord spoke with Ezekiel. He told them to say this to the king of Tyre. You were the signet of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. You were an anointed guardian cherub. I placed you. You were on the holy mountain of God. In the midst of the stones of fire you walked. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created, till unrighteousness was found in you. In the abundance of your trade you were filled with violence in your midst, and you sinned. So I cast you as a profane thing from the mountain of God, and I destroyed you, O guardian cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Your heart was proud because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. The word of the Lord is speaking to the spiritual power behind the king of Tyre. Prophecy of the Messiah. There are messianic prophecies in various books of the Bible, starting with the historical books like Genesis, and the prophecy books like Daniel, Isaiah, Zechariah, and others. Here's a short summary list of who the Messiah would be: a king, a priest, born in Bethlehem, born to a virgin, descended from King David, from Galilee. He would enter Jerusalem riding a donkey. He would be pierced in the hands and the feet. He would be a righteous, suffering servant who atones for the sins of all people. He would be killed and resurrected. The Israelites and their leaders will reject the cornerstone Messiah, but the Gentiles will accept him. He will appear during the Second Temple period before 70 AD, when the temple was destroyed. The Messiah, who is a man, is God himself. Watch my video on this topic for a full explanation.